John Kennedy is a puppeteer on Sesame Street where he currently plays Mumford the Magician. His other credits include work on The Muppets, Dinosaurs, The Wubbulous World of Dr. Seuss, and Jack's Big Music Show. I sit down to talk with John about his career, including his first day working with the Muppets, where he assisted Jim Henson on this episode of Under the Puppet. You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. Welcome to the show that is preserving puppetry through the personal stories of professional puppeteers. My name is Grant Pachoco, and this is Under the Puppet. Well, John Kennedy, an absolute pleasure. Welcome to Under the Puppet.
Thanks, Grant. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. We've known each other for many years, and I'm excited to talk to you about your career because even though we've talked and I know some of the things you've done, I'm excited about finding out more.
Well, first, I'm a big fan of yours. I've showed up to your shows in Orlando, in L.A. Right. I'm a big fan. I love your music, your CDs, and I'm just glad to be talking to you again. We even went to Disney World together. I was thinking about that. Yeah,
I remember that show you showed up to. Like you were right in the front, and there was nobody else there. It was, I think, the Hard Rock or something.
It was the Hard Rock. Yeah, it was a really cool venue, and I'm like, is this the show? Okay. I was right there. Yay, Grant!
Oh, I appreciate it. Well, let's start with you and your puppetry career. Do you remember your first exposure to puppetry?
Well, the first puppet show I ever saw, I guess, was Sesame Street, and that's what inspired me, seeing that show. But I remember a Marionettes coming to my elementary school, and I really don't know who that was. I wish I knew what the group was, because that inspired me as well, because I thought, wow, Marionettes and Sesame Street, and there were so many things in the 70s that you could see, there's the Crofts, all those Saturday morning shows. I was just, crazy about that.
Yeah. So puppets just really captivated you at a young age.
Oh yeah. Everything. I ate it all up.
It's funny that you mentioned Marionettes because I think you're kind of more known as, for Muppet style puppets or hand and rod style puppets. Did you ever study marionettes? Did you ever dabble in that?
I never really studied it. I was thrown into a show once, and that was a disaster. I really didn't know what was happening at all. Someone had dropped out of a show. I guess I'm still on the board of Pinocchio's Marionette Theater, which is here in Orlando. Sean Cohane was the president of that, and he asked me to come on board, and I would do workshops there. It was at one of the malls here in Central Florida, and one person was out for the day, and Sean said, "You got to go in." I'm like, "Well, I don't even know. I haven't seen this show." "It's okay. We'll tell you what to do." And they gave me Captain Hook for Peter Pan, and I did. And now I'm. There's the alligator, crocodile, and I'm like, do I go in? Do I not go in? What happens? And they're laughing, and there's kids in the audience, and I don't know if I ruined their lives forever or what.
You've inspired other kids to be marionette artists, just like they inspired you.
Well, I did do a live hand puppet show at the Marionette Theater, which was kind of weird, but it was like a Halloween show, and that was cool. Sean wrote it, and that was fun to do. Just I don't do too many live shows anymore. I started out doing that in elementary school, from all that inspiration, especially from Stan Freberg. That's someone that my dad turned me on to those records when I was a kid. All his, the Yellow Rose of Texas and Shaboom, and I would, play those records and bring all my friends together with puppets I had made, and we would do, we would lip sync to those songs and perform for the kids at convocations and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's interesting because that's what Jim Henson was doing back on Sam and Friends.
I had no idea. I know. Yeah. And when I found that out, it just blew my mind. Like, I was doing the right thing, when I was a little kid.
Yeah. Well, and you started building at an early age, right?
I did, yeah. When I was 3, I stapled together a Kermit the Frog. And then by the age of 7, I was carving foam. I thought,
Wow.
yeah, and it's sort of been a lifelong ambition how to smooth out cushion foam. I had asked magicians, how do they have those little red magic balls, you get 4 or 5 or whatever in your fingers, and then it's one, and then it's gone,
Right.
And I thought, how do those get smooth? So I asked a magician, and he said, oh, well, they freeze them and they sand them. I went, oh, okay. So that's what I got to do. So I made like a little pig character, and I soaked it with water, and I stuck it in the freezer, and then I was trying to sand it. It didn't work at all. Thought, this is ridiculous. I got to be soaking wet with frozen water to be a puppet builder. This isn't working.
So when you were young, was it, it sounds like that you were just kind of finding out things on your own. It was like you didn't have a book or resources or anything like that to show you how to build a puppet.
Well, I would go to the library and try to find any puppet making books. There were some marionette books, and I enjoyed, looking at those, but I really wanted to do the soft, hand puppets, and I needed them to be lighter than what you would normally have, or bigger, than a marionette. Wanted to get my hand in there and be, a Muppet performer,
Right.
So there really wasn't anything. There was of Muppets and Men. That book had a lot of photos of, how they pattern the foam, and how, so from just those photos and other things from television that I would find, I tried to figure it out. So I started sewing the foam together. That was my next step. I took a big needle and like yarn, and I would make a pattern of the foam, because I didn't know anything about, glue, or, what kind of glue. I'm from Plainfield, Indiana, and there's a Danner's 5 and dime store. That's it. And they had a tiny little section in one aisle of crafts. So you get some styrofoam balls, and, I'd make eyes out of styrofoam balls, and within a minute you'd stuck your thumb in it and ruined it, So I had no idea, how to do this. So just years and years of trial and error, and I made every mistake. But back in 92, I finally figured out how to sand the foam super smooth, and it was like an epiphany to me. I took a Dremel tool, and I took there's a little bit with a screw on the top of it. I think it's meant for those, little round cutting wheels. And those are good for like cutting metal and that sort of thing. But I made my own circle of sandpaper, and I just screwed it down to the top. And so that made it real easy for me to then sand the foam, and I just figured out my own technique for doing that, just sort of brushing away I had a technique of cutting with scissors, sort of symmetrically, doing little divots and cutting away. I call them little waves. If you cut one side and then you cut the other side, now you've got 2 waves. Now, if you cut those waves down, you got, you duplicate that, and then you cut and they get smaller and smaller and smaller. So you're kind of doing a pattern, and you find those same patterns around the whole head or whatever you're carving, and get them down low enough, and then you can take that sander and just sand away the rest of it.
Excellent.
And it's super smooth, and yeah.
Yeah. Now you can go back to that magician and go, you didn't tell me about the Dremel tool.
Exactly, yeah.
Were your parents creative when you were growing up?
My mom was. She loved to paint by numbers. But she didn't really know anything about puppets, so this was all kind of distraction for her. She loved music. My dad loved music. My dad was more into sports and hunting and fishing, and he wanted a hunting buddy. That's what he wanted. So when I wanted to stay home on Saturday mornings and watch cartoons, I think he was kind of depressed about that. But I couldn't help it. I have an uncle who was art director for Dover Publishing, Paul E. Kennedy. He builds his own harpsichords from scratch and for orchestras around the world, and he passed away recently, but he really inspired me. He lived in New York, and that was a mystery to me. What's in New York? And he would send me boxes of materials like foam and fur and stuff you'd never get at Danner's.
Right.
And I immediately built puppets out of it. So anything I'd find like, oh, that's like what the Muppets use. I got to have that. I would, jump for joy.
Now, you are a singer and you have a band, and you've played a lot of characters that involve singing. Did you take singing lessons, or does the singing come just naturally to you?
No, I did. I sort of created my own, I don't know, not classes, but sort of program. Since in Plainfield there wasn't, a place you could do puppets really, and it was what I really, really wanted to do. I just said, well, what do Muppets do? That's what I've got to do. Muppets sing, so I got to learn to sing. So I started taking music lessons, and music came easy to me. I played around. I played bass guitar in the jazz band. I played mellophone, the marching French horn in the marching band in high school. But I was also in the show choir, singing, dancing. So the dancing part, I was a professional dancer right after high school at the Indianapolis Union Station Festival Marketplace. And that's where I auditioned as a singing, dancing, banjo-playing puppeteer. And I got all of them. And I would put a hat out with the puppets. I'd put a hat out for my banjo playing, because I learned to play the banjo because of Steve Martin and Kermit the Frog. That was the they inspired me. Well, I got to play the banjo, because my parents took me to the music store and said, "Which instrument do you want?" And I just like, I don't know. I don't want to play. Everybody sings and plays guitar, but only my heroes play the banjo. So I want to be like my heroes. But it was hard, but I figured it out, and I got pretty good at it. But as far as the singing, I just kept going with it. I had after school classes with it. I was in chamber choir and madrigals, and I was sort of the main music teacher at high school, sort of his protege, and he really wanted me to follow in his footsteps. He wanted me to go to the same college, so he had me go and audition at Butler University, and I got a half scholarship to do music and be a singer, and I really thought I'd be an opera singer, because I really sang more in that style, or at least show tunes. But he was surprised about the opera, because that's what he did. He would sing in a lot of operas. That Butler has a really good theater there, and they put on great shows. Operas and the musicals come through. But I thought maybe opera would be good. But then I always stepped back and said, well, this isn't what I really started singing for. I really wanted to sing to be a better puppeteer. So why would I be a singer now? Why would I just change? It didn't make sense to me. And my music teacher said, "Oh, you're naive, John. Just go take the scholarship and learn music." And I'm glad I didn't, because, it was I could have, I could have done it, and I could see I might be a teacher in a high school now, but my dream was to work for the Muppets. So that's where I wanted to go. And my dad always wanted to be in theater of some kind, and he would see an audition in the paper for a local something, and he'd go, "Oh, I always wish I'd done that," And I felt his despair whenever he said that, and I went, "Well, I'm never going to do that. I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to go for it." And at that point where you're like, "Am I going to go to college? Am I not going to go to college?" My mother at that point, she'd had it with puppets. She's like, you have to do something else. You have to fall back on something else. You can't just do puppetry. You don't see that anywhere around here. Why would you even try? So I had to sign an agreement with my mom that I would be a professional puppeteer and earning a living like within a year after graduating, or at least after going to college for a while. It was, I forget exactly what point it was, but it was a year after that I got a professional job, and I went off to Disney World and worked at the parks.
Yeah, well, I want to ask you about it. It's such a great story. But I do want to back up a little bit about your shows in elementary school.
Oh, okay.
So those shows, as you said, like you were lip syncing to Stan Freberg. Is that what you were doing, or did you write your own shows? Or
well, my music teacher, Mrs. Bennett, she was into what I was doing. I had a lot of fans, in the teacher groups in schools. I mean, I would be a honorary member of the art class, even though I wasn't in art class, just because I made puppets and the teacher thought it was cool. But in elementary school, Mrs. Bennett saw that I wanted to do this, and my best friend, Ed Lucas, had joined me, and we would host the talent shows. So I made sort of a Statler and Waldorf ripoff. When some of the foam that my uncle had sent me, I made my own characters like that, and I've got a photo of me with those two puppets I carved out of foam. You see all the little rib marks from the scissors, but I hadn't learned to smooth it at that point. But that's where I wanted to go with it, and so they put bales of hay up and gave us a microphone, and Mrs. Bennett helped us write the script and introduce each act that would come out in the talent show. And then we had our own act as well. We had a costume, and we built this big. I took a dog bed that my mom had made out of foam, so it was kind of this cool shape. It just looked like a big basket, really, but. It fit, if I cut a hole in the bottom, it fit over my head, and it looked like a lip, and so then I just stuck a big nose on and added some fur, and then I made a hoop. I forget how I got the hoop, but took some suspenders and attached it to the hoop and made like a big pair of clown pants, and we did some routine to some song off a record. That's what we were doing mainly for our, main shows, was just lip syncing to records, but yeah, we got to do the characters, and that continued into junior high. Mrs. Warner was the teacher then who I took voice lessons from in junior high, and she helped us write scripts, and she really thought it was cool that I played the banjo. I mean, she really helped me. She said, bring your banjo in, and I'll tell a story, and you just play along, you score my story, with your banjo. Or she'd let me come in with a stage and just entertain the kids. And then when the other teachers saw that I had a banjo, they would have me go around to all the different classrooms and play. And the same with the puppets. Other teachers wanted to see the puppets, and I had a lot of support.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and those shows led to like bigger projects. Like you were doing industrials and theater gigs, right?
That's right. Right after high school, I got. I was trying to put an audition tape together to audition for the Muppets, and I found this show and tell video. It was a guy in his garage that was editing videos for industrials, and when I said, well, could I come and would you edit this video for me? He was like, sure. He charged me a little bit of money, and he liked what I was doing. And there was another guy there that was working on a project for this company called the Pepper Company, Pepper Business Meeting Products. And I didn't know anything about this, and I didn't know anything about what is it that Henson did? It was where they sell puppets or puppets.
Like the business meeting.
Business
sketches.
meeting.
Yeah, I don't know
business.
the official name. Wasn't it IBM or something?
They started
something
that.
Like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
And so, but this guy, the person in the garage that was editing stuff for the Pepper Company, he said, you need to meet this guy, Mike Wolf. He does all these industrials, and I bet he'd love these puppets, So he set up a meeting for me, and I went over and met Mike, and he was like, "Yeah, let's do this thing. Have you seen the Muppet meeting films?" He knew about it, you know. He said, "Let's do that. Let's do some," and then it turned into like spitting image kind of stuff. I said, "Well, I can do latex versions of CEOs," and he went, "Really? You can do that?" No, yeah, let's. So he sold it, and he would have me come to these meetings and hide behind a podium, and they would show like everything that they do normally. And they did big shows for these industrials. They were a big company, and they would have, you know, tanks come in on the stage, and they'd have singers and dancers, and this guy would write his own music. Mike Wolf would write the music, and then his wife would put together these slideshows of everybody in the company, whatever it was. And it was Fortune 500 companies, so they had money, and they needed to put this show together. And Puppets was just sort of this new cool thing that, you know, Mike had now. So I'm behind the podium, and I would wait for my cue. He'd go through all his slideshows, and he'd sort of get to the end. You know, by that time, my feet are falling to sleep because I'm crammed down behind the thing, sitting on my ankles. And they said, "Well, one way we can, you know, promote your company is with puppets." And then I'd pop up with this puppet, and I'd made out of Velcro fabric. I had made this puppet that didn't have any facial features, you know, and I'd seen that with Muppets, that you could change it around and make it, and I thought that was a good way to you know, make something that would last longer, that we could adapt to whatever live event they would want to do. But a lot of the companies wanted these puppets because I would make the CEO, and then I'd pop up behind a podium just like I'd done in the sort of the meeting, and then, but this was in the live show, so they would send me to Disneyland, you know, and that's where they're having their corporate meetings, and it was the coolest thing. And they were paying me great to make these puppets and to sculpt the puppets out of clay and make them latex and look like the CEOs and all the executives. And I was doing a lot of that. And I had to give that up eventually because I wanted to move where Muppets were working. So that's going to Florida when the Muppets were going to move to Orlando. I had to leave all that.
I read in an interview that your path to work with the Muppets started through a contact you met at the Puppetry Guild in Indiana.
That's right. The contact I had, Brick Bell is, and he works at Disney World actually, and but back in Indiana, he worked at a shoe store, and he would go to the Puppetry Guild, and he just loved puppets, and he had called Henson and had set up an audition to go and audition in New York. And so I was super fascinated by that. And I wanted to get the number so I could do the same thing. I think he didn't end up going because something about his mom didn't tell him that they had called, or he was gone away from college and they didn't send his mail to him, so he didn't get the letter, so he never went. And I didn't want to make the same mistake, so I wanted to get that number. So I went to his shoe store where he was working, and I waited, and he wrote the number out for me. And then I did some other shows, and he performed with me at Union Station. But little did I know that he would end up at Disney World. It was a surprise, you know. Once I got there, he followed me basically, but I don't think he knew. I don't know if he knew I was going or not, but it was just like, "What are you doing here?" and he's one of the, you know, guest, when you go into guest relations, he's been there for a long time, and he's given me tours as well. He used to do the Keys of the Kingdom tour, and that was cool. But you know, I knew about everything anyway since I'd worked there I worked there for 10 months before I went out to California. But then after that is when he gave me the tours. I think he'd worked his way into doing the VIP tour guide stuff.
So did you call that phone number?
I did. I called and I said, "Are there any auditions coming up?" And they said, "Well, we do have workshops now and then, but you need to send in a tape." and then we'll review it and let you know if we want you to come in. I mean, you'd have to get here yourself, and so that's what I was doing, with editing, like with show and tell video, was putting that video together. So every little step that I took kind of went off in different directions, but I still kept that focus of going to the Muppets, and it all helped. Everything that I did helped get there.
Yeah. So you put together your reel and you sent it in. Did they offer you a workshop from that reel?
They did. They offered me to come in and audition. Actually, I got a letter back from Jane Henson's assistant, Adela Dalto. I still have the letter. It was typed. There was no computers yet, so
yeah.
And it's typed, and it's kind of funky because it looked like the paper got jammed or something, and then all the words are kind of off to the one side.
It's very Henson, very Muppety.
Yes. It said, Jane Henson enjoyed your video very much and the photos, and enjoyed that was interested because you're a puppeteer because of your puppetry at such a young age. That's what it said. And if I could get there, there's some coming up, and I think she gave me a date too. So I called the number that she gave, and they told me what date it would be, and I stayed with my uncle, and he brought me up to 225 East 67th Street, and that it began there.
And what was that first workshop like?
Well, Jane Henson was leading it, and Kevin Clash was there, and Marty Robinson, and Jim Martin, and they were all assisting Jane. And so she led it, and then they kind of jumped in and helped out with improv stuff, and we did the little theater workshop kind of things. I had stars in my eyes. I thought this was it. I'd go and they would just hire me. You hear those stories like the Steve Whitmire story. He goes in and they go, "Okay, are you available to do the Muppet show?"
Right.
And it didn't happen like that for me. It was like, well, we're going to do more of these, and we'll let you know if there's any more. I'm like, okay. and so I went away thinking, I don't know if they'll call me or if I'll ever do this, So I kept working on my industrials and kept working at Union Station, and then they called me back to do another one. So I went back again, and that's when I met Joey Mazzarino. That was his first workshop, and we became really good friends out of that workshop, and just leaving, the steps of that studio, 225 East 67th Street. I went one way, and Joey went the other way. But we had, decided we'll stay in touch and talk to you soon. So I went to the airport, and he went back to where he was living at the time. But we continued to be friends and talked over the phone. And he was the one actually who kept my name alive and enabled me to then audition for Dinosaurs.
I want to ask one more. I mean, we're going to talk about Dinosaurs too. I have some questions for that, but I want to talk about these workshops really quick because I don't think Henson or the Muppets do them, or Sesame Street does them as often as maybe they used to. But every once in a while, they do these workshops. What advice do you have for puppeteers who go to these workshops for the first time or whatever that maybe can help them out with their experience?
Well, the most important thing, and it's what Jane Henson told me, is to just get a monitor and a camera set up and just keep working at it. Now, you mentioned the guild in Indiana, the Puppetry Guild. Another person that I met was Mark Gale, and he's a name in the puppetry business. And I had built a puppet for him, Frank the Horse, the original one. I don't know if you've seen that. He did a lot of videos with that. But I found out that he had gone he had done a lot of shows as a little kid. He's like 14 years old when I met him. And he got invited through a festival to go to Fraggle Rock with his dad. And I just wanted to hear these stories. So I had to contact him. I went to his house. His little brother was a toddler, and well, Mark's 14. So, but he was excited. He had I forget who built this puppet for him, but someone from Fraggle Rock, one of the builders, had built him a little fox puppet, to keep him interested in puppetry. And that was just the coolest to see a real, in my hands, a real Muppet made, puppet.
Yeah.
and we were inspired to then, do great things later. But it was great to have someone that had met Jim Henson, or had at least met Frank Oz's dad, I think, is who had seen Mark and said, "You should come to Fraggle Rock," So it's just like he had touched the Muppets in a way,
Right.
And but we together started auditioning, or not auditioning, but we sort of set up our own little workshop. And like you said, what is it that you would tell someone to do to practice on or work on to make it into the Muppets? As Jane said, use a monitor and a camera. That's what Mark and I did. We set up a monitor, we set up a camera, and we would work together with puppets I had made and just practice and practice hours and hours and hours. But I guess the first time I'd ever tried to do that, and I didn't even realize what I was doing. It was before I had gone to New York and before I'd met Jane Henson. I had asked around, knowing that they use, video equipment to work on puppetry. It's all in the frame. I wanted to find someone who had a video camera that could record video. And one of my best friends, Gary Bond, his dad worked for IUPUI, the university in Indianapolis, Indiana University, Purdue University at Indianapolis, where I ended up taking some classes eventually. But he was the AV person there and took all the photos that would happen at the university. So Gary's dad, Rick Bond, he had the only video camera that I knew of in Plainfield. So he was so interested in photography and shooting stuff like that he had one of the the ones that you would put the deck on your shoulder and then a giant camera on your other shoulder. That was what he had. And so I convinced Gary that we should do puppets in their house during summer break. So like for the whole summer, I think this is 1983, we just tore apart their living room. And we would do like Queen songs and Kool and the Gang, and we just played records and lip sync. We took all their lampshades off and turned it into a drum set. And I used that monster that I said was like a foam dog bed, was the drummer, So we had another friend in the neighborhood was a drummer or played drums. And so we put him in, and then Gary's brother Randy was in there too with a puppet, and Gary was playing, and then I did the main guy. One of my favorite ones was Jerry Reed. Amos Moses is the song, and we would play that. And then we had a little organ set up behind the couch, so I'd hide behind the couch and have him, sing the lead and play organ. And then Gary had a puppet with. I'd made my own guitar that I'd cut a hole in the center. So I'd cut it with a jigsaw, and painted it, and you put your hand through the center of the body, and then the puppet arm, you put the glove on, and the arm would go over. And I'd seen that idea. I got that idea from Truck Shackley and the Texas Critters. You remember them from the Barbara Mandrell show? Yeah. I really wanted to have my own puppet band. I would draw pictures of characters that I wanted to have in a band, and I always wanted to have a puppet band. So that's what we did. We had a puppet band that summer, and I would sing Dragon Attack from Queen, and the best ones were when Gary's dad would run the camera. We would just set it up on a tripod most of the time, but he handheld them, and and we brought in some extra guys, and we would really do it up on those days, like on a Saturday, we would do it. And I got in the foreground, and then I could see the monitor. When I was behind the sofa, I couldn't see a monitor. But he had it hooked up to his big, wooden television set, that we had. And I could see that when I was performing. So that was really my first trial of seeing what it's like when it's, backwards. You have to learn that technique to get through that. And, almost every performer, certainly with Muppets, you have to get through that, figuring that out before you can even begin to be a character or do voices or anything. And that's part of doing right hands and live hands and rod hands and assisting and seeing how it all works in the frame. And, but I was experimenting with that back then in the early 80s. And then later with Mark Gale, what was it? It was 87, so 83 to 87 to then 1990 was my third. It was when I got to Disney World, and I had it down by then because I had friends who wanted to do the same thing, and we got together around somebody's house around Disney World with all the Disney employees, and we would do workshops and keep working at it. You just had to get that skill down.
Yeah, and it's amazing too because you're not waiting for somebody to give you that experience. You're going out and getting that experience on your own. You know what I mean? Like You're not waiting for permission, which always drives me crazy. It's like, do it yourself,
Right.
It's really amazing. Yeah.
Even now I do that. I still set up a camera and just have fun lip syncing to songs, and I'll make a puppet and then just goof around with it for a while, just to figure out, what the puppet can do even before, I'll send it off to someone, because they'll ask me, how do you perform this? Or sometimes I have to do a tutorial on how the puppets work. So you kind of need to figure that out beforehand.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your move to Orlando, because knowing about it and reading about it, it was sort of this bold choice to just where are the Muppets? I'm going to go there. Can you tell a little bit about that decision making and heading to Orlando?
I think there was some divine intervention there, because I built up my skills, and I was singing and dancing and playing the banjo and doing the puppets at Union Station, and I was taking classes at IUPUI, and this is 1990 now, and I hear the first time the Muppets are going to Disney World, because I've been in contact after 2 workshops. I've been in contact with Henson, and they knew that they might use me if I lived in the place that they were working. And I thought, well, I don't know how would I get an apartment in New York? I'm not really making enough money, and if I go there, I'm not working, so how would I do that? I just couldn't figure it out. And so when I heard that they were going to Disney World, I'm like, aha, that's it. This is the ticket. This is how I'm going to do it. I just have to get to Orlando, because they'll be working there, and maybe they'll need a new guy, And so I called Henson and I said, "Oh, you're going to be doing work at Disney World. If I moved there, you think I would get any work?" And they said, "Well, we can't guarantee it, but it would, increase your chances, certainly." So I went, okay. So I got to get a job there so I can get an apartment and be there. So I immediately hung up and called Disney World, like the 1-800, cast member hotline. And I said, "I'm wondering, do you have any jobs available? Is there anything that I could do there? Like, I don't know, in costumes or characters?" And they said, "Oh, characters? Yeah, we're having auditions. Where'd you say you're calling from? Indiana? Yeah, we're having auditions for the Here Come the Muppet show in Indianapolis." And I'm just like, what? Actually, they didn't say Here Come the Muppet Show. They just said character costume performer. You need to be able to dance a little and have, coordination and be willing to get in these suits. And later I found out in the paper, my dad was reading, the thing that I was doing. He said, "Hey, do you see this audition?" I said, "That's what I'm doing." Well, it's for the Here Come the Muppet show. Like, well, I'll be right in the thick of it. This is amazing. I couldn't believe that was happening. That I want to go to the Muppets. I had audition. At that point, I was a really good dancer. I needed to just be able to have coordination and show up to this audition. And I aced it. They hired me. They relocated me to Florida, and there I was.
Wow.
It was kind of that fast. I had to break all the ties, though, because I was still doing. I had an agent. I was doing birthday parties. Anything I could do to make money. I was, putting out the hat at Union Station to earn a living. I was full load of classes at IUPUI, and I was doing these industrials. I was doing stuff at the Indianapolis Repertory Theater as well. I mean, I had everything going, and I just thought, well, I could keep working this probably for my whole career, and maybe I'll get a job. I was thinking going to school, I would take classes as a cameraman or do something in the audio visual, so then I could work at a TV station, and then there's my in to do my own show. I sort of had a plan like that. But then when this opportunity came, and I'm like, someone's telling me I got to go to Florida. I got to do this, and Jim Henson's going to be there, and I've done the workshops. I'm set to go. I just got to show up, And so, boom, I just cut everything off. And I left. It was the hardest thing. April 7th of 1990.
You remember the date and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was my parents' wedding anniversary, so it was so weird to be leaving home on that day to drive to Florida. And now it's my wedding anniversary, my wife and I.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just an important day.
Yes,
4/7.
big life changes on that day.
4/7, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and one of the first things you did when you got down to Orlando was that you actually worked on, was it a commercial for the Muppet show that you were in, but you got to like right-hand Jim Henson, right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the first morning, getting that job was unbelievable. I'm like, this is it. I did it, And I get there, I meet Jim Henson on it was on New York Street, and I still see the sun coming up behind, all the fake buildings that were painted. And he's just backlit, and he's like this god, Finally, to meet him, and his hand is so big. That was such a shock to shake his hand, and it just like goes to my elbow almost. I'm like, wow. And I could see why, he didn't need any stuffing inside of Kermit's head. He's got a big hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, that first morning I'm inside an ice cream cart because Jim has said, "You'll be perfect for this first shot." And I'm like, okay, because I'm a little guy and I'm a dancer, so I'm thin, and so they took the ice out of this. It's an ice cream cart on the front of a bicycle, and I got to do Dr. Teeth for the first thing I ever did was like put on Dr. Teeth, and Jim was saying, yeah, just make him laugh, just to, sort of do the Muppet head shake, that I learned later, but that, nod him, make his head nod and open his mouth just like he's laughing, so he told me to do that. But, I get the weird stories, the things that have happened to me through the years and different productions. That was the start of it right there. The first moment of working for the Muppets. They said, let's initiate the new guy, put him in that ice cream cart, and it's a tiny box, and I had to sort of turn my shoulders and my head sideways just to get down in, and my knees are up against my chest. They had just taken the ice out, so it was freezing. And to lower myself in, I had to sort of put my fingers on the edge of this raw sheet metal to lower myself in, and it was sharp. So I cut all my fingers going in. So the first thing they had to do was bandage every finger. It was bleeding. So I'm down in this freezing thing with Band-Aids on my fingers. And then I was in there for like 2 hours.
Oh, my gosh.
So by the time the sun had come up and, it's 90 degrees and I'm dying inside this little tiny can. And, it took me a while once I got out just to reorganize my body back to its original shape because it was so crammed. But the bit was that the Muppets are all around this sort of cart, ice cream cart, and the guy that's on the bike rides across frame, hits a fire hydrant, and then the fire hydrant sprays water on all of these dancers. So it was a really big number on New York Street, but it didn't make it into the commercial. That was the weird thing.
We're here! The Muppets have arrived at the Disney MGM Studios theme park. Meet Kermit, Fozzie Bear, Miss Piggy, and all your Muppet favorites.
Other stuff I did during that day, I mean, it was a dream come true, working with Jerry Nelson and Dave Goelz, and it was just, and of course Jim Henson. So it's just, at one point I walked up to Jim Henson and said, Mr. Henson, sir, anything you need, I'm ready to do it. And he didn't even look at me. He was just kind of looking off. I think he was thinking about where he was going to go for lunch or something. And he was like, yeah. And then he just walked off. So that was, I hoped he would talk to me more, but he was pretty busy. And at one moment we were in front of the Chinese theater at the Disney MGM Studios, and they had a circle of directors' chairs. Everybody was in a chair except me. I was standing there. And the conversation, finally, Jim turned it to me and was like, where have you come from, and what do you do, and do you do any character voices? And I said, well, I do some of your guys' voices, and I did a bad Fozzie and a bad Miss Piggy and a Dr. Teeth. And Steve Whitmire at that point, he was sitting next to me. He said, well, that's a pretty good Dr. Teeth, but Jim said nothing. He didn't say, oh, great, or well, excited you like our characters, or whatever. I don't know. He was just like, yeah, well, I'm hoping you can send me a video and send a tape. And this would be a second tape, not the one from before, but this would be like another one that he could see. I don't know if he'd ever seen the first one I sent. I think that was just Jane Henson, but this tape I had to put together to send to New York that he could see. Now, this was like the last days of April. It might have been the last day of April that we're shooting this, and he died on May 16th. So he did see it. I got a letter after he passed away that he had seen the letter, but I didn't know what he thought. The day that he passed away, he was supposed to come and approve our show that we were doing, the Here Come the Muppet Show, which he said the commercial was for. He obviously didn't make that, and was devastating to the whole world, and especially for me, because I was going to find out what he thought of my tape that I put together, and I was going to be working forevermore with him on the Muppets. That's what I felt, and it's like, what happened?
Yeah. Well, what advice would you have for puppeteers when it's their first day on a set like that, like on something big?
Well, I play that back in my head all the time. I think what I should have done, what I should have said. I really didn't run up and say, hey, I love all the shows you did, and hey, remember this and remember that, and I didn't really tell him everything that I could do. I told him I played the banjo, but I didn't tell him I was a dancer. I didn't tell him my story, how I got there. It was just a brief conversation in front of all the other puppeteers. So he just wanted to get to the point and just, we need people here, and send me a tape so I can look at it. But I've played it back in different ways, like, well, what if I'd just done some dance steps there? Man, they would have known I was a dancer. Or what if I'd done my own character? I had my own characters. Why didn't I just do those voices? Why did I do his voices? That was so stupid.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess the best advice would just be yourself. Later on, I found out Muppeteers don't like you to come up and go, remember when you did that? And, well, let's sing that song together. They're just thinking about what they're doing now. They don't think, oh, well, let's all get together and sing an old song we did. They don't do that. In fact, they don't even talk to each other when they're not working. That was a surprise too. It's like you're on when you're working. You get together and now you're a team, you're part of this club, and now we're going to do fun stuff, and you sort of prepare for that. But you don't, call up everybody and how you doing? What are you up to today? Everyone just goes off to their lives, which is basically on pause when they're working. So you want to have your own lives in that time. So that was one thing. And the other advice, be yourself. I guess it really is good to sort of stand up for your talents and tell people what you can do. And if you can find a way to do that, that's not obnoxious, I would say that's probably a good thing. But always stand up for what you want to do, and don't be afraid to say, I'd love to be on that. That was something I learned down the line too, is sometimes, you get in a production together, people don't even know other performers' interests. Would they want to even be on that show? You almost have to say, I want to be in this. And it was kind of what I did originally. I had to push. You gotta, at sometimes, and this is something I do even now, at some points I put my career on hold and I just say, what have I done? And I go back through and I redo my resume. I re-put together a reel. I put together puppets I've built or anything like that, and I just get a folder together of those kind of things. That now that you can email this stuff, back then I'd go to a print shop and I'd get all these photos printed together and bound into a little book, and I'd get a VHS together or a DVD of all the jobs that I've done at this point. It helps remind you of what you have done, and also gives you something that you can hand out as, when you say, well, I'm interested in doing this, after Dinosaurs, I didn't know, they didn't really know how to cast me in shows, because I mainly did eyes and stuff. I didn't do a lot of character voices or any improv kind of stuff. And, they flat out told me, we still need to see more from you. You worked on this show, primetime show, but I still had to audition for any parts that were coming up. And if they didn't immediately think of you for that role, you had to go in and lobby for it or audition for it. And they said, well, send us a tape, And so I did. I taped together, even after I was in Dinosaurs. I put together a tape of all the things I was working on, and I was working with Ed McMahon at that time. I was building puppets for a pilot for him, and we'd shot the video, and I put pieces of that in, and I was working on a local, like TV 18 in Orlando. There was a Ranger Bob, had a kids club, and so I brought puppets into that, and I did routines with him, and then I even did some old Stan Freberg bits again, only he had this, at that time, had a great thing called the video toaster. I don't know if you remember that.
Sure,
but you could layer video on video, so I could play all the characters. And so I did those routines again, and I would use the same puppet and redress it and do Banana Boat. That was the one that we did with the bongos. And so Deo. And I'd set up the bongos, and I'd do the one side and sort of telecast where the other character was going to be by the eye lines of the first character. And then they were able to play that back, and then I could, just remembering what I was going to do, and then, and then using those visual cues of the first puppet, I could place him where I wanted him to be. So I'd pre-thought it out, and then, of course, knew all the lip sync and did that, tried to get that perfect. That video then, it was weird. I'm come back to New York, 225 East 67th Street. They're doing some Nickelodeon bits, and Kevin had hired me to come into town to work on a certain thing, but they were looking for me because they thought I could drum, and because of my musical abilities, that's helped me also. That every little thing that I did is like, puts it in people's minds. Oh, he can do that. Let's have him do the drums for Animal. And Frank was there. And they wanted to ask me if I had if I had done any drumming, and would I be willing to do the drums for Animal? And I'm just walking around in Manhattan, and someone from the workshop that I knew had said, "Hey, they're looking for you at at the mansion." I'm like, what? This was so weird. I went in, and I had my tape with me that I had made, and that's always been my secret to success is. Success happens when preparation meets opportunity. So if you prepare and you make those things, or if you have a dream or you know what you want to do, if you prepare for that and then you look out for the opportunities to happen and you're ready, that's when success can happen. But if you don't prepare, if you don't have that, toolbox of abilities that you can use at any moment, or that video or that, that photo that you can show, yes, I can do that. If you don't have those ready, the opportunity just goes away, and, the success does too. So right. I still do that now. I come up with songs. I don't even know what they're for. I'll write songs. I'll write story ideas. I've stuff, 20 years of stuff that I know someday I'm going to use that. I don't know when, but someone's going to say, "Hey, do you have a song, like a Christmas song?" Or, "Oh yeah, I got 3 or 4 of them, here they are, and that they might use them, So it's that preparation meets opportunity equals success. And that's what happened that moment when I ran up to tell Brian Henson and Kevin Clash in Jim Henson's office at 117 East 69th Street, the mansion, I'm in there in Jim's office, and Brian says, "Well, can you drum?" And I say, "Yes." And I said, "Well, remember when you said you wanted to see a video? I have it right here." Wow. So we put it in, and it actually, that moment led to another opportunity for me. And not only just doing the drums for the Wipeout video for MTV with Animal, which I got to do, but there was this new show called The Wubbulous World of Dr. Seuss, and they were going to be using multi-levels of, or layering of video with characters and scenes, and Brian was really impressed with that video of mine that I did of Deo, Banana Boat song, and he said, "Yeah, my dad used to do that. He used to lip sync to Stan Freberg records," so he confirmed it again there, and he was like, "That's a key?" And he thought the key was really good because I guess they had, lit it really well. They had a room at TV18 that had the green screen and everything. So, I didn't know that was going to happen, but Wubbulous World of Dr. Seuss with that same kind of technology at times, but that set me up for that too.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to skip over Dinosaurs. Because it's such a fan favorite of a show. What was, you mentioned you got to audition for that. What was the audition like for Dinosaurs?
Well, Disney let me off of work to go out to audition, and Joey Mazzarino had said, "Hey, you want to come out? We'll share expenses. I'll audition." And he decided not to go at the last minute, but I went ahead and went. And I had a great friend, one of the ladies that did Miss Piggy in the show I was in, Cindy Haratunian. Her brother lived out in L.A., and he worked at Adventure 16. He was like a manager at this sports kind of store. And she said, "Well, you could stay with my brother, Kenji Haratunian." So I got to stay with him, and he took me into the studio the first time, CBS MTM Studios, and audition, and Radford and Ventura. I'm not sure what the studio is called now, but back then it was CBS MTM, all these shows. And we auditioned in there on the lot, and it was a 2-week-long audition. Oh. You had to get through the first week to get to the second week, so it was a big cut. The first was 20. They narrowed it down to 20 people, and I came in, I guess, at the point that they had already seen like 700 people. They did people who worked on Ghostbusters and all these, Gremlins and all these big movies. But I think they were looking for more of, the hand puppets and the the monitor technique and that sort of stuff, real Muppet technique. So I sort of had an edge because that's what I've been working on the whole time. They were going to teach the animatronic stuff, but this was sort of building a new group of performers, that would go on and do stuff. And I've worked with some of the same people now from that moment, that I met right then, even to this day, Allan Trautman, Julianne Buescher, Drew Massey, met at Bruce Lanoil, these and Terri Harden. It came down to 4 of us that got hired full time. Kevin Carlson's another one that was there, and these are all still great friends of mine. And so I kind of followed along this path of, I forgot one important thing, and that was I met all the New York puppeteers when I was in Orlando, because after Jim had passed away, the group that had done Eureeka's Castle, and that was Jim Krupa, a lot of performers from New York, and now that I work on Sesame Street, were down there, and Pam Marciero, and Noel McNeil. So I met all of them. Jim Krupa actually hired me to do it. So I met, and he's a great friend now. We still get together and do stuff, and we work on shows together. He taught me how to do right hands, even though I had done Kermit's right hand with Jim Henson at Disney World, and I'd got to put on a lot of the Muppet characters for that commercial. I still hadn't done like a series or anything. It was just like 2 days, for that. Mm-hmm. But for this, it was 10 days, and Joey Mazzarino was on it as well, so we became better friends there. But so that, back to Dinosaurs, how that was, I had to quit Disney in Florida to work for Disney in LA. And because I'd signed a contract for a year, they would pay my moving expenses. I think it was $600 to drive from Indiana to Florida. Now, 10 months later, I'm flying to LA and moving there. And they're like, well, you have to pay us the $600 back. I'm like, what? but it's Disney. What I do? As I borrowed money to go to Florida, now I'm borrowing money from my parents again to go to LA, and I had nowhere to live. I was staying with Kenji, but I had to pay him a little bit of rent for the room, and I was the only thing I had at that point, and I'd gotten the job. The 4 of us got the job, and I had no money. The only thing I had was a little bit of credit on a Shell gas card, and so and then we did the first few shows, and it was a hit. And so I'm working on Baby Sinclair, the top show, and eating SpaghettiOs from the Shell station because they hadn't paid me yet. They paid me just a little bit, but I owed everybody, Yeah. So it was really depressing to me. Like, it's a top 5 show. I'm broke.
Yeah. Now, working on Baby Sinclair, you work very closely with Kevin Clash, who you've met before, before that. But did you pick up any puppetry techniques from working with so closely with Kevin on that show?
Well, he taught me the musicality of puppetry. He's really into jazz, and his mannerisms. He would have me, we would hang out on the weekends. He wanted me to learn his mannerisms, which I guess is kind of what each Muppet performer had done through the years, even back in the 50s, I think. It was told to me by some of the builders in the shop that if they're giving you a hard time, that's a good thing because they want to, push you and get you, bring you out of your shell and be a really good performer. And but the musicality of it and learning the mannerisms, that's what it was. It was like watching him perform, and following along with him. And I think when we first started doing Baby Sinclair, he said something really important to me, which was, okay, when Baby Sinclair is on the set, Baby is alive. Baby rehearses. Baby is the performer. It's not us. So it sort of incorporated this almost a Ouija board kind of skill set, that I'm doing stuff. I'm listening to him. I'm trying to anticipate what he's going to do, and I don't want to be too late with because I'm doing his eyes and his eyebrows, which the eyes are the window to the soul, right?
Right.
But it's his soul. So how am I going to find out his soul? And the musicality, and I would have, and that's really just, I'm the baby, gotta love me, it's like a song, and when you start to hear him do that, I know what I'm gonna do. I've figured that out. So you build a catalog of, how does baby blink and wink and how do his eyebrows move when certain things happen. You get that in your fingers because it's all on a stick, with potentiometers and servos and stuff. And you kind of play it like an instrument by just following along. And that's what we did. And that I do that a lot with all shows that I work on now, is just when you get into the mode of performance, you let the character lead it and not you. It's not like, what do you want me to do here? And, oh, you messed up, and, oh, I'm sorry. You say something as a character, instead. Well, oh, you didn't like that? You just come up with, I meant to do that. You come up with little things that the character would say, and that helps find things for your performance later in the lines that will be used, And that's why having the Muppets together as a group and performing together is so important, because you find your musicality that fits with everyone else's musicality, and your voice, which blends with everyone else, but yet is different and is part of that. And I think Stan Freberg did a lot of that, in his early records, the Shaboom and the Deo and all that. He would pull the characters out of the music and make them stop everything and figure out what's wrong with that, or you're upset by the banjo player, nice banjo player, he does all this stuff, that's a darling part,
Yeah.
And he makes these characters out of what would normally be an ordinary scene or song, and the Muppets do that too, they draw that out. So when Kevin said babies to be alive on set when we're alive, he wanted me ready to go, and he doesn't have to call for me, doesn't ask for me. I just know when the character's about to go on and we're about to rehearse, I'm just in that mode, and I'm helping create this character.
Yeah, Dinosaurs is such a great show. You also, for many years, and shortly after Dinosaurs, have worked for Sesame Street.
That's right. After Dinosaurs wrapped, Kevin came to me and said, well, I could probably use you in New York if you want to move there. And then there's that New York thing again, moving to New York. I guess I got to do it. I still resisted. I was like, I don't know. There's still stuff going on in Florida. And at that point, I'd met Ed McMahon, and there was some other show possibilities with that. And I thought, well, I'm just going to take my chances in Orlando. So I think I missed the boat a little bit, because if I'd gone right when he said, I think I would have had some more opportunities. But I took a year of figuring it out, and I finally said, well, is the offer still there? And I went and I stayed with my uncle again, and at this point he was out in the country, so it was harder to get into the city. He was in New York State. So my first day of work, I was 2 hours late because I missed that bus that I was supposed to catch, and I had no idea where I was going or how to get anywhere, or how to use the subway, or I'm just lost. But I finally got there, and it worked out because I'm still there.
Right. And you are, you've called yourself sort of a utility puppeteer.
Yeah.
Where you maybe from day to day, you don't know exactly what you'll be doing, but they call you into, like, hey, come in, we need you to do this hand, or we need you to do this background puppet. Do you enjoy that kind of work, like where, it's, you never know what you're going to be doing?
I totally love that. It's because I just show up and sort of erase everything in my mind. might not even know what the script's about. They tell me, do this, and I do that. and it's always something different. Like, John Kennedy, we need you on the set, and I'll run in. And, one time it was, we needed to choreograph Kira Sedgwick. I'm like, what? I've never heard the song before. What? She's there and they're ready to roll. Here, quick, listen to the song. Okay, now tell her to do something. And I did it. And at the end of it, Kevin was like, you just choreographed Kira Sedgwick. It was a quick wrap up of the end, and they didn't know what to do. And I said, well, we'll just sashay here, sashay there, and then we'll spin, and you'll come down. All my dancing technique just, jumped. And I said, well, I know a little bit of stuff. And I think she was looking at me like, who is this guy? But because I guess there wasn't a choreographer there, and they just needed some kind of step. And I do that sometimes. They'll ask me. It's not so much anymore, but for a long time it was like, let's ask John to do that.
Well, it's like you said that you're prepared for the opportunity.
That's it.
You know how to do it.
Yeah, I know how to play. Rosita. There's this song. Rosita's playing guitar. Jump in and do Rosita's hands and play the song. Okay, play it on the track. Because I haven't heard it yet. Okay, and because I can play guitar, I know. Basically, okay, that's gonna end like that, and it comes up and ding. And you know how to play that. But then there's real playing and there's Muppet playing, and Steve Whitmire had told me that about doing Rolf the Dog's Hands on the Muppet Show, playing the piano, that Steve's a really good piano player, but you have to do it like a puppet would do it, and you can get away with a lot of stuff, but as long as you emphasize like that one note, or you end at the right time, or you start on the right, you do that gliss, you do something musical that a real musician would do, and you incorporate it into your performance, you can get away with not knowing, oh, well, that's a C. Oh, no, it's an E. Nobody's going to see that or know that. But if you're in sync with what's going on, and then you'll ding, 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 bonk, you just hit that note right on it, it's impressive. So that's what I'll listen to, play it one more time. Okay, now I got it. Okay, let's go. And we just do the whole song, and there it is,
Yeah.
Or throwing things. And I'd learned that on Eureeka's Castle. Throwing puppets is a thing. I didn't know that. And coming from Indiana, my parents are from French Lick, so they knew Larry Bird. Well, they didn't know Larry Bird, but they knew certainly he was their hero, because my dad was into sports, and we had to watch Larry Bird whenever he was on playing for the Celtics, and because French Lick's where Larry Bird's from, we'd drive around and see his house, visiting my grandparents, and so it was a big thing. And we had a basketball goal in our backyard, and my dad would always we'd play horse, whatever, a lot. And I was on the basketball team at some point, not in high school, but elementary school. And so I could shoot and I could hit things, and I loved throwing darts and things. So when I could throw a puppet, I was like, this is it. This is where I can shine, So Kevin would always bring me in we need that chicken to hit Chris, so I'd have to throw the chicken and hit Chris right at the right moment. Just he says his line, and just as he's saying, well, this place is crazy, boom, hit him in the head, So also on Muppets Tonight, there was a really fun moment where these cannonballs, I think Gonzo was firing all these cannonballs, and then they do, sort of these montage of different scenes throughout the set there, of cannonballs hitting people in the head or in the body or whatever, and they'd have me throw one. There was one that I did where I hit Johnny Fiamma right in the side of the head, and he's moving, so I'm on an apple box, and they put a little smoke into there's like a hole with a little mesh inside the foam cannonball. They said, put your hand over the smoke and then fire at him, so I did a really good shot, nailed him right in the side of the head. And it's like those kind of moments, because I don't know if you've ever seen that, the bloopers for Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, and that drum rolls out of the
bass drum, yeah.
30-some takes or whatever. You could go on all day if someone can't hit that moment, but if you can nail it right on that, first take or second take or whatever they want to do, you've got a job, kid.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's. I think it's important for puppeteers to kind of find out what their specialty is,
Right.
and to showcase that.
Yeah.
Because, like as you said, you have a job, and people could, we need a we need a puppeteer who'll climb in an ice box.
Right.
Who do we know? John does that. Okay, we'll hire him.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's super important. Well, let's talk about the Wubbulous world of Dr. Seuss, because not only did you puppeteer on that show, you wrote some songs for that show as well.
Yeah, we made up the little intro that Fox and Knox does at the top. Bruce and I wrote that. And then I got to write a song second season. The producer was really nice and said, we heard you want to, write music and would like to do that. We'd like to offer you to write a song. And Bob Golden was the music director on that, and he was open to it, and he was very encouraging. And I've done a lot of writing now on my own, especially for my band, but I haven't done a lot of Muppet writing, different shows. But that was certainly exciting to do that. I enjoyed it. "Run the Race" was the song I did for the second season.
Do what it takes to run the race. Spin or slide, run, take your place. Run. It doesn't matter how you run, just run the race.
Now, for the Wubbulous world of Dr. Seuss, it was, as you're saying, sort of this layered stuff. There were different layers to it.
Right.
That seems like it might have been a little bit more of a complex project to work on because of that. Or was it easier for you because you'd done it before?
Well, I had done my own little show with a bunch of characters in Orlando. When I was on a break, we did it for Rainbow 65, was a local channel, and I had a character named Vinny the Rat and Repair Bear and Stanley the Beaver and all these characters, and I layered them all. And I had been practicing this technique, so I had like a whole bunch of character voices down, and this opportunity came up to work on the Muppet Treasure Island CD-ROM game, because all the Muppet performers were working on the movie, and this was in England, and they said, "How do you like to come to England and shoot this?" It was like 10 days of shooting. While they're shooting the other movie, they would bring in the puppets, and then I would do whole big numbers where I did all the puppets, like all the pigs, all singing their song that they do. And I would do them each, layer each one, and then try to do the same choreography. But then I did over like 30 character voices too, because I've been doing that in Orlando. It was like boom. And David Gumpel was the director on that. And he said, "Wow, we got this thing coming up. You'll be perfect for that." So again, because I didn't know I was preparing for this show that was just exactly the same way. Avid, that was the next move in nonlinear editing, was the Avid. And these guys that I had met had a studio, and they had one of the first Avids. They'd spent like, I don't know how many thousands of dollars on this thing. It was really expensive. And there wasn't even a gig of memory in this thing. So we were blowing it out every day. We're just praying that it would render. But I was doing like 5 characters in a scene. But because of the Muppet Treasure Island thing, David Gumpel, who was going to be on the Wubbulous World of Dr. Seuss directing, said, "Hey, you're going to be perfect, kid. You're going to be good at this, because we need a lot of voices." So when I did the audition, I think they had already thought that I would be good at this because of the Stan Freberg thing in Jim Henson's office with Brian and Kevin, and then this show in this CD-ROM game with all the character voices that heightened my the possibility of me working on this thing. Then when I auditioned, I got the part, and it was basically many parts. And I think over the the course of 2 seasons, there were like over 60 characters that I did.
Wow.
I mean, it was a lot, but I got to do, Sam I Am and Horton the Elephant and Norval the Fish and Mr. Knox and on and on and on. 'Cause each show was like a TV special with a whole new land of characters.
Yeah.
You'd had your base characters, but then you would go off and then 2 little tiny, in the second season, 2 little mini stories inside of that. So it was interesting.
Let me ask you, as a performer who does all these different voices, how do you keep them straight so that you don't like repeat a voice on the same project? You know what I mean? Like, how do you use any techniques to kind of keep your voices straight in your head?
Well, I don't do as much character voices anymore. I'm not really sure why, but I'll pull them out. I remember just the visual of what the character looks like, and I know that part of my voice. I kind of visualize what my throat is doing, the placement of it, and I feel it, and I know, I know I can get way down deep and get this thing, and there's a whole range of characters I can do in there. And I know I can kind of get it really bright and forward, and I know I can do, a bunch of things in there. And I know if I kind of, muddle it up a little in the middle, I can get a mellow kind of voice, So there's different, and then, stuff you do with your tongue, too. Like, I can do this kind of stuff, by pulling my tongue up and doing the alien, Alvin the Alien was on that show. Yeah. And then you can yodel a little into a voice like that, and you just feel that placement, and I could get something. I mean, I could do it with the lisp or without the lisp, or I could do something, spread my mouth out this way and do something, or show a lot of teeth and do the same thing, So you sort of develop a toolbox of what your throat and mouth and tongue can do, and remember those placements, and you can find something. But really, and Marty Robinson told me this, the way he finds a puppet voice is he looks at the puppet's face, and he'll remember that, just before he goes on, he looks at the face and you look like this, and so, and a lot, I think that's part of the magic of it, especially the Muppet characters that have done super well. You can imagine that voice coming out of that puppet. I mean, it just looks like the mouth could make those shapes. And it's funny, people see Muppet performers performing their characters. You get distracted because, you end up making the same face that the puppet is doing when you're performing. You look like an idiot, And whatever it might be, you're kind of doing what you want it to do.
Yeah. That's why I always like if I'm leading a tour at Henson or something, I'm taking pictures with people with a puppet on my hand.
Right.
They always go like, "Well, you're smiling too." I'm not in the picture, but it's like you have to. You have to do that.
I've never seen a performer who's just like not even thinking about it, just doing it, and nothing happening on the face. It's always there. It was always fun to watch Kevin doing Elmo, because he would get his face in this big, happy, contorted look, and the way he had to place his mouth. And I remember Steve Whitmire said that's how, watching Jim perform Kermit, that's how he knew. Kermit kind of had a little bit of a frown. He would look at Jim doing this frown thing, so he would try to do that face, that Jim did to try to get the voice, and knowing the performers and knowing how they're doing it, helps get to that end result.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you about a show, because I know it's one of your favorite projects that you worked on, and that's Jack's Big Music Show.
Oh, yeah.
Why do you think you connected with that show so much?
Because of the music and just the fact they would have musicians on, and I got to play the drums, and I had convinced David Rudman that I didn't have to have rods on the hands of Mel the dog, that I just kind of contorted, I had them set just right, because you could roll them around in the arm socket. You could get them to a placement and I got, the staff to the Wranglers to put the drumsticks in a certain way that they just kind of sat there, and you you could just move a little bit, and those sticks would move, and they'd sort of stay in place. And I'd pin the arm in a certain spot just so it wouldn't rotate over. The sticks kind of stayed up and naturally. And then all I had to do, and this I actually I contributed to knowing the banjo, like the downbeat usually with the thumb, and so that would be my beat. I'd be almost like a thumb pick, to turn the puppet and hit do do bot do do bot do bot do bot do do bot. This kind of thumb down technique, and then my fingers would hit the other. I'd get into that, and then at some point, because I had rhythm, the music director said, "Well, let's just put a mic on John and let him go, and he can do this drum stuff, and we'll have the drummer just do what John says, or mimics." And so it was with what Mel was doing, and sometimes they'd give me a click in my ear, and they'd say, "Just do some stuff, or during this bit, just play along, and if you feel like you want to do a drum fill, just sing that drum fill." And it wasn't like I had to beatbox or sound cool or anything. It was just to give them a reference. And that was fun to do. It's always fun to just go,
Yeah.
Mel, the musical, magical magician! Ta-da! Hooray for Mel, the musical, magical magician!
Well, I wanted to talk about in 2004 and 2006, you released 2 books about puppet building, Puppet Mania and Puppet Planet. What made you decide to start putting your puppetry techniques into books?
Well, back when I was on the Wubbulous World of Dr. Seuss, I had an apartment in New York, and I didn't have any furniture yet. It was all in LA, and I was trying to get it back there. So all I had was like a folding chair and a fold-out table. But I had I was building puppets, always making puppets for whatever reason. But I was up like on the 19th floor, and it was an amazing view over the city. And I was just inspired to sort of remember what got me started with puppetry. How did I get into this thing? Because at that point, I'd made it. I'd got a character on a Muppet show. It was Seuss. It wasn't, the Muppet Show, but I've done my 5 years of training, doing right hands and stuff, which I had heard early on that was what you had to do to become a Muppet performer. You had to do right hands for 5 years, and then you got a shot, and it happened right in 5 years. 1995, after I had, got in 1990, 95, boom, Wubbulous World of Dr. Seuss, and all these characters. So I'm up in this empty apartment. And, because it's New York and I'm used to Indiana and farm ponds and, the wide open spaces, it's just not where, I like to ride my bike out and in the country, that's what I like to do. And, you can't really do that there. You can ride a bike, but it's dangerous. I think it is anyway. And so I'm just kind of stuck in there, and I just had to remember again where I came from, and it reminded me all the puppet projects that I used to do. So I just started putting sort of a folder together of all the things that I created, what were the steps that helped me make that made, and I wasn't thinking that I was going to write a book, but that became really important when in 2000 I was asked, "Hey, you want to write a book, a puppet making book?" And it took me a year to get it all to pitch it and get it to a point and sign the contract, and then 9/11 happened and they put it on hold. But because my editor liked it, a year later I got a call again that said, "Hey, we think your book would be a really strong one to do again." It was just an email originally. I had done a magazine cover with some puppet projects, and I did an interview saying, Puppet Revolutionary in Arts and Activities magazine. I was on the cover, and it was through a friend of mine who I had met at Plainfield Elementary, Brentwood Elementary School in Plainfield, Indiana, was a test area where they do arts and crafts for American Art Clay Company. And this guy did promotion for American Art Clay Company. And he said, if you ever want to be in a magazine with your puppets, let me know. So I knew I had that card, that if I ever wanted to just get my name out there doing projects or whatever, I could do that. So I decided that's what I'd do. And that road, that initiation of that, because that article ended up in Northlight Books, that was the name of the publishing company. Northlight Books gave me a call and saw the article and said, hey, why don't you do this book with us? So that's what initiated it. But then 9/11 happened, and then we moved on, and that came back to it. They came back to me on it, and then they made it a full book, because before it was going to be just a smaller, part of a collection of other, of crafts of different kinds. But I got my own book. So that's how that happened.
Excellent. Well, they're both fantastic books,
Thanks.
and people should check them out if they have not seen them, because they're a lot of fun. And I've built several of the puppets in there, and they're just fun. It's just, if you want to have a fun, and they're not something necessarily like building a Muppet style puppet would take you weeks. These are things you can sit down, and it may take you a day or so, but you'll have a really fun puppet at the end. So.
Thanks. I just felt like, I wanted to give back to the career, that I had, and give kids something that they could use like I wanted to. I was going to the library and looking for puppet books. I wanted to have a book on that shelf for some kid to inspire them and help them along. This is how you do it. Here's how you can sand foam. I sort of answered all the questions I had when I was little. Here's how you perform a puppet. Here's how you, I didn't know these things. I mean, it just kind of I had to figure it all out. But I wanted, it's sort of a guidebook to help people in different directions if they want to be a puppeteer,
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Well, John, you live in Orlando, and I know you travel for work to New York for Sesame Street and other places, but I'm curious, what is the puppetry scene in Orlando like?
Heather Henson was here for quite a while with her company, Ibex. I don't think she's here now, but it was a huge amount of work that happened all at the same time, especially with when my books came out and her festivals and stuff like that. And because of Disney World and all the puppetry there's a lot of talent there with puppetry. You got Michelee Puppets that are down here. And back when all that was happening as well, about 2004, when my book was coming out, there was the city of Orlando had a puppet troupe. So you had all these sort of factions of puppeteers, and it was an exciting time. Since I think the city doesn't do that anymore, especially with the way that things are now, there's not a lot for puppeteers to do at Disney. And I think Heather, I'm not sure that she's here. Sometimes I hear that she's down here, but she certainly is not here as much as she used to be. So the Ibex stuff has gone sort of international and not so much local here stuff. So there's not as much, but I have my company here, and I do work for Disney sometimes, and build things, and also for Universal Studios for Halloween Horror Nights. So I always have some project that comes along that I'm having to start here and then put in my suitcase and finish in New York or wherever I am. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, your career is so amazing, and I know that we probably skipped over some projects that some listeners wanted to talk about, so we'll have to have you back on. But I always like to ask, what is the highlight of your puppetry career so far?
Well, I still think the highlight was meeting Jim Henson. I mean, that was my goal, when I was little. So when it happened, it was just unbelievable, and it felt like such a huge victory, that I wanted to do this, and against all odds, I did it. It was so huge. As far as once I got performing, Mel the dog was a really big highlight to get to do that. But now I'm the amazing Mumford the Magician on Sesame Street. So that's my first main Muppet character on Sesame Street. So I kind of made it with that audition and getting that job. The great Jerry Nelson, getting to perform his character, who was my favorite character when I was little. Amazing Mumford was the one. I loved magic. I had considered even going into that when I was little. I would buy all the magic tricks and stuff, and I loved Mumford. So to get to play him was like a crowning achievement.
Is there sort of a feeling of full circle because Sesame Street inspired you and now you're working on Sesame Street?
Exactly. Yeah. I still pinch myself every time the season comes back. I'm like, I'm still here. It's amazing.
Well, John, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. Just thanks for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
My thanks to John Kennedy for being on the show. For links to some of the things we talked about, check out the show notes for this episode number 54, over at underthepuppet.com. Well, now it's time to announce the winner of episode 53's giveaway for a $50 gift card to puppetpelts.com. The question was, what was the name of the builder who built the Muffy Mouse puppets that Nina Keogh puppeteered on today's special? And the answer was Noreen Young. And the winner is Mel Campbell. Congratulations, Mel. Can't wait to see what you build with what you buy from puppetpelts.com. Well, now it's time for this episode's giveaway, and we've got something really, really fun to finish out 2020. It is an Aussie Works prize package. Aussie Works designs company logos, draws caricature portraits, character designs, and creates puppet characters for both the Aussie Works YouTube channel and as commissioned works. This incredible prize package includes a print celebrating Carol Spinney signed by the artist and an Electric Mayhem sticker, all designed and crafted by Aussie Works' own Justin H. Pyatt. And as if that weren't enough, Justin is throwing in a handcrafted practice puppet as well. That's right, we're giving away an actual Aussie Works puppet for this episode. You can't afford to miss this giveaway. All these goodies will be collected in a tote bag from the Aussie Works TeePublic store. To see a picture of the prize package, including the puppet, visit the show notes for this episode number 54, at underthepuppet.com. To be entered to win this incredible prize package, you just have to answer this question from the episode you just heard. What was the name of the Five and Dime store in Plainfield, Indiana, where a young John Kennedy used to go to try and find puppet building supplies? When you find the answer, send it in an email to underthepuppet@gmail.com with the subject line giveaway, and you'll be entered to win. All entries for this giveaway must be received by December 15th, 2020. The winner will be chosen at random from all correct entries and be announced on the January 1st, 2021 episode of the show. One entry per household. Good luck. Big thanks to Justin Pyatt and Aussie Works for donating the prize for this giveaway. For more information about Aussie Works, visit aussieworks.com, and for original art, puppets, and prints, check out their Etsy store at etsy.com/shop/AussieWorks. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Under the Puppet. If you have questions, suggestions, or feedback about the show, call our voicemail line at 818-806-9604 or click on the Call the Show button in the free Under the Puppet app for iOS and Android. You can also send me an email to underthepuppet@gmail.com, or you can connect with the show on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by searching for Under the Puppet. And don't forget to tell a friend about the show. Thank you so much for listening. This episode of Under the Puppet featured music by Dan Ring and was edited by Steven Staver. Under the Puppet is a production of Saturday Morning Media and made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a monthly pledge for as little as $1 a month. Patrons get new episodes before they are released, behind-the-scenes information, and exclusive bonus episodes. If you'd like to support this show and the other fun content from Saturday Morning Media, become a patron. Head on over to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up your monthly pledge today. You can also tell a friend about the show or leave the show a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. Under the Puppet is copyright 2020 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Bachogo executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com. Under the Puppet proudly presents The Adventures of Timmy the Tooth Reunion. In this almost 90-minute video, you will hear great stories from the cast and crew who brought this amazing puppet show to life. Plus, you'll see never-before-seen artwork and exclusive behind-the-scenes video. Under the Puppet's Timmy the Tooth Reunion is available right now at timmy.underthepuppet.com.
You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.